It's been rather troubling to see some provinces in Canada moving backwards when it comes to their coronavirus approach. I'm thinking particularly of Manitoba and Ontario, under stricter lockdowns than, well, in Manitoba's case, that they've ever seen. In Ontario's case, moving back to the way things pretty much were in the spring. So moving backwards in that regard, but also moving backwards in another way that is kind of troubling, in a way that suggests we've either lost, forgotten, or are just ignoring a lot of the great lessons that we have learned in the past 9 months. So go back to the first wave, and there was just a lot we didn't know about this virus. What is this darn thing? How do you treat it? Who's most vulnerable? Who is it hitting the hardest? What do we think about vaccines? Are they going to be effective? What are the timelines for them? And so forth. Lots of questions out there, pretty much zero answered. Now, there are still some variables out there that we don't have answers to, questions like long COVID and so forth, but there are other issues that, well, many issues that we actually have learned a whole lot more about. One of those things that we've talked about a lot, and we talked about it, I think, mostly in the summer, was talking about all the secondary harms that come about from the lockdowns. A lot of media reports, a lot of experts stepping forward to talk about, say, the rise in mental illness, mental health challenges, addiction. We had a lot of addictions workers speak out on that. A psychiatry journal predicting that there would be excess suicides from about 500 to 2,000. It was a pretty wide berth, but that's what their modeling projected that the lockdowns would cause here in Canada. A whole bunch of different conversations. You know what I'm talking about. And public health officials and politicians, I guess when they were pressed at the podium back then, when we were talking about those things more, they acknowledged, yes, they're part of the conversation, and then they moved on. Now, they announced new restrictions, as Manitoba and Ontario did, and I did not really hear, when they were up at the podium, the acknowledgement of those challenges. And this conversation that, look, the line is a bit of a crude one, that, okay, the cure cannot be worse than the illness, but still that broader idea, where are we at right now? How are they actually balancing those trade-offs? And it's very troubling that they did not acknowledge that when Manitoba and Ontario announced these new, very severe restrictions. I don't know if they forgot, or they're just not thinking about it, or they don't want to think about it, or they have a very good argument as to why those things should not actually be applicable right now. If they do, though, I'd certainly like to hear it, and we didn't hear that. So are we just forgetting the lessons that we have learned the past 8 months, particularly when it comes to these secondary harms? It looks that way, and it's very troubling. And I think more Canadians need to, well, raise their hand and ask some really firm follow-up questions.